Hey, we are back for part 2 of our review. I am, of course, joined by Jared Eureka Wallace. Jared, how are you, sir?
Good. How about you?
Excellent. I'm ready to review some more Opus 17 cards. Unfortunately, this first one isn't very exciting. This is Ursula. Obviously, it's no contest for the Opus 11 Ursula. I don't know how good this card would have even been back in Opus 1. And if you blow up the art really well, her eyes are kind of crazy. She's got like this look going on. So, anything to say about this Ursula?
Yeah, I think they wanted to give us an Ursula to use in like L3. That's about it.
Fair enough. Next, we have Arciella. I was very interested in this one when I first saw it. My friend has tested it a bit, but he said he's never really used it. He's like, I just want to throw it away every time it comes up. I would rather always play something else. Like, in theory, 4K, I don't know if the damage negation is ever going to matter a whole lot, but 4K power bump on demand is kind of cool, and it's a repeatable effect, but I don't know. I'm not really sure what to think about this one. How do you see Arciella?
Yeah, I think Mr. Cole brought this up in the best way possible. It's like, well, would you play a 3CP 11K? And I don't know if I would actually play a 3CP 11K in the first place, but even if I didn't, I definitely wouldn't play it if it only became 11K on the stack. So I don't really like this card at all, and I think a lot of people are very high on the card for reasons that I can't really fully understand. If the top ability wasn't on enter the field or attack, but was instead on like whenever as a 0 CP thing, then I would be more inclined to play it just because it would be nice to have like a counter for Man in Black or Krill, these kinds of abilities. But as it stands, I just don't think that the card is really quite as good as a lot of people are saying it is out of the gates.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that on the stack idea. All right, next we have Cardian. He's just kind of pack fodder. I've got nothing to say.
Yep.
And then we have Gabrant. This one I do have something to say about. So maybe some people are high on this because someone did bring up, maybe it was YYT, someone brought up a good point that like, well, he's a 2 CP and you don't have to think of giving up the CP for the Brave because you can just do it when you want to. If you feel like you don't need it, you don't have to spend it. And that's a good point. I hadn't considered that. However, I'm a honk for the Opus 5 Momodi card, which says for free, give something Brave once per turn. And so part of me is like, I don't know, if I'm trying to give something Brave constantly for the Umaro or whatever thing I'm trying to do, I feel like I'd rather pay 1 CP up front and then do it for free every turn than have this guy that I have to give up that potential CP to do it. That being said, his damage 5 isn't terrible, but I don't know. I'm just not really high on this, but maybe I'm just too in love with Momodi. What do you think?
Like, there's just a way better Earth backups in basically every single deck. So, like, why would I play Gabranth over any of those cards? Maybe in formats where there are fewer Earth backups, like L3, L6, it could potentially see play, but it doesn't have a particularly good job. It doesn't have a particularly good category or name, so I don't really expect to see a whole lot of this card.
Fair enough. You want some anti-aggression? I've got some anti-aggression for you. This is Duke Snakeheart. Cool back attack card. There's never really been a back attack card that has just like soared and really taken off, no matter how many they seem to make. But I love the idea of this one, that he just comes down, he does the surprise block, and he auto kills whatever it is. Really great, especially if they've committed some kind of big party that you can just go surprise, kill. That being said, again, I don't know what it is about back attack. Like, in theory, that should be great, right? Something you can play on their turn. And, I mean, he's a one and done. I don't know, 2 CP, you break something, it's a body. Like, I don't dislike it. And I probably sound like it. I don't dislike it. But I guess I'm wondering, when am I going to want to use this? Or, like, what deck am I like, okay, we're going to put in Duke Snakeheart, and surprise, it's totally going to wreck him.
Yeah, in Magic the Gathering, this card is called Ice Fang Quaddle, and it lets you draw a card when it enters the field. And that's kind of like what it takes for these kinds of effects to be playable. So I don't really think that this card is particularly good. I really like it. I really think it's like cool. In terms of like competitive viability, though, I don't think it works very well. I think the card that I would generally be the most excited to play this against is Avalanche. But it doesn't work because they have bigs.
Yeah.
Or sorry,
it's bigs.
So yeah. So like, it doesn't even work against like the best party deck in the game that I really want this card to work against. So I don't know. I wish it worked. I think it's really cool. I think it has a lot going for it. You can add it back with the Sarah, but it doesn't really line up. Like the math doesn't check out.
Yeah. And also, since you can never guarantee a block in this game, they can go, okay, well, before you declare the block, Brynhildr or this effect or whatever to get rid of it. So,
or even after you declare the block, they can Brynhildr it because then it didn't battle them, so it doesn't break them. So
good point. There's a warrior. He's the Earth standard unit, so we'll skip past him. Titan. This summon is, I don't know. This one's hard for me to evaluate. On one hand, well, 9Ks are, they can be a pain, but it's got to be 5 or more. And the 9K I always think of as Barrett. Like, he's good against Tenzin, but he doesn't hit Barrett. But then the big 4K power, but like 5K buff sounds amazing, right? You're saying pay 3 to cancel out your Sasano to make it irrelevant. But we've also seen so many Earth cards that have these big boom, and they just don't, no one ever seems to want to use them. Is this Titan any different?
Yeah, I think this kind of does strike a nice little middle ground. We saw the Titan in previous sets that had 2 modes, and one of the modes was deal 7K, and one of the modes was buff something by 10K, and that one kind of like didn't really hit the mark. I think this one is a little bit better in giving everybody 5K and dealing 9K instead of 7K. Which is kind of what it's competing for in terms of slots with cards like Cactar. I think the way that this card really sees play is Rydia, the 2CP 5K legend that we all know and love or hate. I think it works particularly well in that deck. Buff everything by 5K is basically going to put everything in that deck at a 10K or higher power mark. It can be used to protect Rydia. It can be used to protect Sophie. It can be used to protect your Palom Emporum, so I do think that this card is going to be kind of a pain to play around if it does see play in the Rydia deck. That being said, that deck is very, very tight on slots, no matter how you build it. If it's 3-color or 2-color, it's always going to be tight on slots, and I'm not sure if this really makes the cut, but it could, especially because it does kind of protect your cards from, like you said, those effects like Titan in particular, Titan and Sasano in particular.
I need to get like a little animated GIF for slots. It's just doodly 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 ding 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 every time we mention the slots. Yeah. So speaking of slots, we've got Durando next. I don't know how much Earth support is there for Brave Exvius. Obviously, you have things like Mont Leonis and Ketone, but I feel like there's better stuff to do with the Glaciella crystals. Nonetheless, this guy does have an interesting effect in that if he hits you for damage, he basically says draw 2 cards back from your break zone, which is really cool. He is a Viking. Unfortunately, that currently doesn't have any synergy since he's a job Viking. Maybe in the future, who knows. He's got a nice ability to threaten. Clearly powerful if you can do it for free with the crystal. Again, just kind of weird Earth. So like, I don't know. He's this card that I don't think there's anything bad with his text, but I also just feel kind of about him.
I really like the card. I like this idea of like, well, it's kind of like Zidane too, where like if it hits, you draw 2, which is like really, really strong. Obviously, getting back 2 cards from your break zone is very, very powerful. And the other big thing about that is that he has this built-in protection with his S ability. That being said, you're right in that it doesn't really seem... There isn't a whole lot that is drawing us to play Water Earth crystals over some of the other crystal decks. So I think the thing that I would say is if Water Earth crystals ends up being a good place to be, just in terms of the meta, then this deck this card could potentially be in that deck as, a 1 or 2 of, as a nice way to generate advantage over time. That being said, I don't think it will be a key part of the deck, and I think in general it's just going to be kind of like more annoying to deal with than anything else.
Baron Guardsman is next. Everyone's favorite characters from 4. We all know him, don't we? No, this is the Earth Standard unit. Is it worth it to you to pay 4 CP to play a limited Mist Dragon, but it's attached to a body? It's not worth it for me. Do you care about that at all?
It's worth it for me.
Really? Ooh, tell me.
Yeah, I actually think that this works really well when you pair it with other forms of like removal. So like X-Death in particular comes to mind because X-Death removes the characters, and then Baron's Guardman can remove the summons. The other big thing is this is a 4, so it's going to make your Rydia bigger. Is one thing. The damage 3 is relevant on the 9, and the fact that this is a standard unit means it's going to come out of the monk backup too. So I think this card is most likely to see play in Mono Earth monks, where it is nice to be able to play cards to the field and not have to hold like 3 Mist Dragon in your deck. That is definitely a big consideration in terms of slots. I think it's going to see play in most Earth decks, to be honest. I have high expectations for this card.
All right. Guess we'll see if you're right. We have the Seeping Breeze, Earth Monster. He sucks. Moving on.
Garbage.
Yeah, absolute garbage. Here's Prish. I know so many people have said it, but I've got to just echo it. Like, they had such a cool Prish art for, I think it was Mobius, and it was like a 14 card that had the wind, earth, or something. And then why didn't they use that for this legend? It's just this. It looks like a common card. It does. Other than that, her effect is like, okay, except her body is so naturally weak. Clearly, they want you to discard and have this Prish effect. And I've said this about the Emperor and Ultros. Like, if they want these cards where they want you to play all these same name characters, why not give them a backup that says, hey, this card is allowed to play as many of the names as they want on the field. It has like title rules, as long as you play the different ones. Now, it is a monk. If this wasn't a monk, I would throw this out the window immediately because I just don't like it. But as a monk, okay, monks already got a lot of fight effects. Generally, they get some kind of power buff, whether it's Enna Crow or, Yang or whatever else it is. But I don't know. I know you've played a lot more monks than me, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell me about Prish.
Yeah, people have given this card a lot of shit. Oh my god, garbage. Oh my god, it looks terrible. And I think that's a little short-sighted. I mean, it does look like garbage, but the card itself is very solid. I think this is like a nice 3.5 out of 5 kind of card. It's doesn't do anything super fancy. It's just like does what it says on the card. When it enters, when it swings, you get a fight. But that's just like good in the monk deck. Like you're playing all of this power stack. Your Yang at damage 3 is giving everybody plus 1k, and Brave. This card at damage 5 is going to have plus 2k. Your Aerith gives your entire board plus 2k, and a Crow gives 1k. So I think in general, like you can expect this card to be sitting between 8 and 9k, and then in the later stages of the game, if you're getting if a lot of pressure is being put on you, then it can easily be like a 10 or 11. And in those kinds of situations, like being able to fight every turn is probably one of the better tools that this card has. And you can discard when you're in a pinch to get that damage and kind of retain your advantage with the fights. And I think that's like very, very important. So I think this card is severely underrated and given way too much shit by the community. I think Monks looks very, very solid in the upcoming set. There's no Mashri anymore, which means that there's no... all of the Monks get bounced to your hand, which was one of the big pains of playing that deck after Dogo's rise to power. And I think that this deck is... or the deck in general looks quite good, and I think Prish is just an automatic 2 to 3 of in the deck when it does come out.
Well said, sir. Well said. Okay, what about this next monk, Matt? I can't see how you'd ever play this over a Matt that searches out your only copy of Sophie. Am I right?
Yeah, no, this card is garbage.
Well, who's not garbage? Matoya. I love this backup. It's so versatile. It could be cheaper Minfilia on entry, although it obviously only gets one. It just removes its Mist Dragon on entry. Or, hey, did they go really aggressive? Or, hey, they got a big board? No problem. Let's just break everything on there, and it's not tied to a power value like Titan is. I can't see how anyone would play Earth and not slot at least one copy of this card. Maybe it'll be one of those weird ones that like, in actuality, no one ever wanted to do it, but it's just so versatile. How do you not use this card?
I imagine that you will always play one of this card in your Earth decks. But I don't imagine you're ever playing 3, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find decks where you really want to play 2 as well. I think it's definitely just one of those now we don't have to play 3 Shantoto. Now you can play 1 Shantoto and 1 Matoya, and that's just good enough, And this card has that added flexibility, so I really do quite like the card. I think it's a little bit overrated by the community. I think people think that this is now we don't have to play Shantoto. We can just play 3 Matoya, and I don't really think that reflects the reality of the situation at all. But it is definitely a good card, and it will definitely see play.
Fair point. I like that. All right. Then we have the Monk. This is a standard unit, one for Earth, but obviously it's a Monk, so it just gives all those extra marks for Monk powers. Then we have the Night Dancer, and this is one that I would absolutely love to see succeed. However, the little practice I have seen with it, kind of my fears about it seem to be true, because what I like about this is it says... it's like an A-Team commercial, like, kids, stay in school and play your backups. You've got to play your backups down. And this guy says, hey, you don't play your backups? I'm not going to let you attack. I'm a big bouncer. I just sit in front of the door. So I love this card against a deck that goes, all right, here's 3 forwards. I'm going to attack you to oblivion. They go, no, too bad. You got to play your backups. Go back in line. Got to play your backups. But that's the fantasy of it. In reality, what I've seen is what I was afraid of is that it's a body, so they can just kill it. Okay, that's nice, Brynhilder. Or here's this ability. It's gone. Now I can attack freely. Or even just having a single backup. It's like, all right, well, I'll just attack with the forward that I really want to. This guy's a 5K. What are you going to do? Block? And then... So, like, man, I love it as an anti-aggro card, but it just feels like the pieces have to line up so perfectly. Haha, you played 3 with no backups. I play this. Oh, no, I have no removal. Sad day.
Yeah. So I think I would at least be able to defend this card if this one had back attack, or if parties counted as attacking with 2 forwards. But you can party attack once, even if you only have 1 backup with this card out. So like it doesn't even work against Avalanche, which is like really where I wanted to have this kind of card work. So I'm actually of the opinion that this card is probably just complete garbage. So unfortunately, I think it's really cool, and I think it has like this whole Dual Horde series has great art, but this card is definitely like the worst one of them, I think, and I just cannot get behind it.
That is unfortunate. Curious to know your thoughts on Shadow Lord. This one has gotten a lot of hype, and me and a few of my other friends have kind of gone like, I don't know. So here's the thing: it's just kind of impossible not to compare him to Titan. They're both 7 cost. They're both 9K on a body. They both have the same idea. They come in and they clear a board. Now Titan can't naturally break 9Ks. He always breaks 8 and below unless you use something to boost him up. And Shadow Lord, however, just hits a job. Well, the problem is it doesn't hit Soirees, which was the most prominent job last set. However, it does work against Tenzin or Barrett, which are the 2 big ones that I thought of. However, unlike Titan, Titan rewards you if you break a bunch of stuff. Shadow Lord punishes you by dealing you a point of damage, and he randomly becomes Dark later. I don't think that'll probably be a big deal, but I guess it maybe could potentially screw you over. Like, I don't know. I just don't know, because I think I would like this so much better if it was just in a different element. Why is this in Earth? We got Matoya, like you said. Matoya, okay, we have Shantoto, we have Hecaton Kyre, we have Titan. Earth doesn't need more board wipes. Ice has no board wipe. Lightning has a really crappy one in Fel Thanos. Like, if another element got this card, I think I would absolutely love it. But right now, I'm just like, well, it is better against Avalanche. It's better against Samurais. Is it better against any other set? Like, I don't know. What do you think of Shadow Lord?
I think this card is very, very good. I think that the Titan comparison is bang on. I think Titan is better if your opponent is playing like a bunch of weenie stuff, and Shadow Lord is, or like if your opponent is playing like a good stuff deck where they just play like the best, most valuable threats at their face value and try to like push damage in, like Alcid, Zero Miss, and stuff like that. Titan is going to be better against those kinds of strategies, but those kind of strategies suck for the most part. Like, most good decks in this game right now are job decks, or they've run some amount of job stuff in addition to their good stuff cards. So like, for example, Palamporum is just like a random hodgepodge collection of good cards plus Palamporum, which share the same job, and so Shadow Lord can kill both of them. But yeah, Shadow Lord is just dunks on Avalanche, just dunks on Samurais, and
Sky Pirates
I think
too.
A lot of people Yeah, Sky Pirates, sure. If you can clear the Edel first, so let's say I'm playing monks and I swing with my Prish and I've taken damage, I can clear the Edel with the Prish fight, and then I can play Shadow Lord and break all the rest of the soirees. So I'm mostly on board with this card as a card that works against soirees when I want it to as well. I think there's it's a trade-off whether you want to be rewarded by Titan dealing your opponent a point of damage or taking a point of damage yourself. But I think that there's so much damage text in Earth, particularly on this card, and then in monks in general. There's Yang, there's Prish, there's Aerith is giving that buff, and there's so many cards that want to hit certain damage thresholds. I think Yang is probably the biggest one there. That I think dealing yourself a point of damage in Earth is just mostly upside. And so I really, really like this card. And I think, Prish was a marginal buff for the monk and like mono earth deck in general, and I think Shadow Lord is a huge buff to that deck. I think that's like really what we should be talking about when we're talking about monks in the upcoming set is this card enabling Yang, this card pushing your damage threshold up a little bit higher, and completely swinging, you know, those job matchups into your favor.
Great points. Yeah, if jobs are really relevant, I think this guy's going to see a lot of play, so good breakdown. Next we have Ewan. I was really high on this when I first saw it, but the more I started to think about it, you know, in the situation you want him to be in where he goes, he blocks something, he dies, and he gets to go to the top of the deck and threaten a burst, but it's only on damage 3 or higher. And then now your opponent can make a choice. Okay, I just won't attack. Not only am I preventing, I'm forcing you to draw the Ewan again, so you're technically only drawing one new card every turn. Which isn't something I thought about a lot before, but a lot of, you know, competitive players had made that. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the more I think about him, the more I'm just kind of not really high on this guy.
Yeah, cool card, clunky text. It's nice that there's like they're giving us more 1-drops that synergize with Zombie in Earth, but that's about it. I don't think this card is really the sauce, and it doesn't even have Job Ninja.
Yeah. Unfortunate. You know who's awesome, though, is Lise. I have to admit, the only thing I can immediately think of for her is Avalanche, but her text reads, if a party deals your opponent damage, activate Sophie's effect, which is you draw a card and you deal them a point of damage. And to think of her with Biggs is disgusting, because Biggs says, well, they're unbreakable, so you're probably not going to block. Now I'm going to draw for Biggs, draw for Lise, damage. Gross. That being said, Avalanche can run very lean sometimes, and so I've wondered, is this actually too expensive for them? Are they going to want to spend 2 to drop this? But I've also seen some people say, hey, you put in an over Noctis. It's a real shame her job is fighter. She's not a Scion or a monk or a martial art or anything. Like, I don't know. And the whole, like, I'm just kind of over the entire, well, she's technically Ida, she, you know, so you can't play both. Like, just let her be a Scion. Let me play them together. She's Earth, whatever. Anyway, tell me about Lise.
Yeah, I think I was pretty low on this card when I first read it, and then as more and more people are talking about it, and I read it over, I'm a little bit higher on it. I was very disappointed that she wasn't a monk, but yeah, I think she's potentially playable in monks. She's potentially playable in Avalanche. I think she probably looks best in Avalanche because that's really, you know, the party attacking deck. Whereas she might just be like a one-of nice way to push damage in monks if she ends up being there. You know, you only have one Sophie, so you kind of would like to have another way to do the same kind of thing that Sophie does, and that might be where she shines in monks in particular. But yeah, in Avalanche is probably the primary place we see her, and I think we probably see some amount of copies, but that could be anywhere from 0 to 3. I'm really not sure how good this card is without playing it. But when the turn that she comes down, she really has to activate that effect. So you have to be very, very sure that you're going to do it. So I think Avalanche is probably the only place where it really, really makes sense.
Well said. Lich, I don't really have anything to say about him. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, no, not really.
Rydia, terrible name because Rydia always has so many good forward cards, and it's like Regis, except very awkward timing to play, so I'll be amazed if this sees any play. Maybe great and sealed, but...
Yeah, cool card. Good in sealed, good in draft. Maybe potentially good in draft. Doesn't really look like it's going to pass the stress test for standard or probably even L6, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Lorenzo, another one of our FFB cards. Technically a Dragoon, though I can't see him fitting in since he's Earth. I honestly didn't think much of this card until, strangely enough, I forgot about Brave, and someone mentioned that's a good card with Momodi or Gabranth. Like, so that way you eliminate his downside, and he's just this massive body that can get you any character back. So I think if you pair him with Brave, I like him quite a bit. I don't think you want to use him without. Like, I don't think you want to incur the downside of him then just being out for a turn. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so this card says, like, use Brave with it, and then you get a character back. But, like, in the same set, Durando does the same thing, but it has no downsides, and it gets an extra card, and it has an S ability that protects it. So I think, like, the deck is stacked against this card. I think if you wanted to play this kind of card, you would just be playing Durando. And there's, like, I've never seen a card that just, like, immediately in the same set has a card that's just a strictly better version of it. But that's what happened here, so...
And
I don't expect to see this card at all.
Yeah, that's fair. Good comparison to Durando. So we've buried all our troubles in Earth. Let's go to the sky, see what kind of lightning is up there. Ovjang and Mainjang. Okay, so I have to ask you, can Afmao search out 2 copies of this card, or can she only search one? Oh, she can, so she can search the same card twice. Okay, so obviously works well with Afmao then, immediately feeds into the fact that it has its specials. Choose a character, it loses all of its abilities. The fact that its character is kind of interesting. Most cards like that only hit forward, so the fact that potentially you could hit a backup or a monster if it's causing you whatever kind of trouble is interesting. And then the other one, obviously, can you nuke something for 9? However, the most use I've seen out of Afmao from other players is they just go get the 2 backups because it's a card that just gets 2 backups on entry. So then again, I don't know. Yeah, if it weren't for the backups, I think I'd be a little higher. But to me, it seems I just don't see why you wouldn't go get the backups.
Yeah, so the most interesting use that I saw with this, and I guess we should talk about Afmao with this, is Afmao lets you search for both of them, and then you can recycle them. The most interesting use that I saw with this is playing the 3 of this one, 3 of the Afmao, and then playing some amount of the backups of the other ones as well, and not playing the backups, but then just recycling them with Robel and recycling them with the Afmao, and then just using them to continue feeding into the S ability over and over and over again. So actually running, like all of the puppets, maybe not as like a 3 of or whatever, but running 1 of the backup or one or 2 of each of the backup, and then running 3 of the other of the Afmao and of Afjang. Have it really seems like there's something there. Is it like good enough? And I'm not really sure, but like given an unlimited amount of time, it definitely generates a lot of value. There's no restriction on which kind of forward or like what state the forward is in. It doesn't have to be active.
Amazingly, yeah.
And so just the 1 lightning and the discard when you're kind of getting those cards back for free every turn with Robel, or cycling them back every turn for 2 CP with Afmao, kind of gives this card the legs to stand, but it is like a very fragile combo. Like you don't want to play against cards that remove your breaks from the game. It makes it difficult for you to play your own X-Death if you played X-Death with them, which is another interesting part of Lightning. And obviously the Objang and Neijing on the field has to like stay on the field, which is sometimes a difficult task. So I'm not like completely sold on the card and the whole package in general, but there is a lot of value built into it, and it does look very interesting at least.
That's a cool combo. I hadn't considered that with Robel. One other point I want to give Afmao too, since we'll just mention her here. Her entry effect is actually 2 separate auto abilities, so it's really not worth it for your opponent to Amaterasu her if you just go turn 1 Afmao, go search out, because you'll still always search out one of them. So that's really nice that that's split up like that. All right, moving on from the puppets, we've got the Red Mage. This is the Lightning standard unit. It's kind of cool, especially on damage 3. I like that it has potential, kind of has that mirrored effect of like you break something going for haste, although it's not as it's not as cheap as mirrored, and 2, it's cost restricted. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the big downside of this is that even when you have the damage 3 and you get haste, it can't give itself haste, which is kind of like it's like, well, okay, now I gotta play 2 cards in the same turn. In addition to this 5 costs, I've gotta pay out some other costs so that I can really capitalize on the haste effect. And I think because of that, it's kind of grim. I don't really think it's quite strong enough to see play immediately. It could surprise me though, probably in one of the L formats instead of in standard.
Yeah. There was Afmao. We mentioned her. Here's Alisaie. So kind of a little new breed of scions, this Alisaie with her brother Alphino too. And I've watched my friend use these to pretty good effect in this kind of water lightning list, using the Y'shtola from last set as well as the Thancred. That was always a nice little combo with the Oracle. And especially on damage 5, Alphino getting to enter, he can play Alisaie right to the field. Alisaie is then going to trigger both of her effects. Alphino gets 2 as well. Granted, that's damage 5, but even on damage 3, this Alisaie can grab the Y'shtola back, grab the Thancred, and then she gets another forward back. Cool little card, so maybe this is just, if Scions are going to be a thing, maybe this is a new way they've got to push, but I really liked her the more I saw her in practice.
Yeah, so I was pretty low on this card when it was first spoiled, because I was very down on the fact that, like, okay, so for it's like a 2 CP 7k, right? That's really all it is what I was thinking. Because the damage 3, like as a generic lightning card, like you're not gonna have another Scion, right? But the more we saw and like the more it went on, the more I was like, Well, actually, it can get things besides Yishol and Urianger. Like, well, if we're playing Water Lightning, then it's gonna get the Alpha Nod, and if we're playing, or maybe even Thancred and stuff like that, there's really a much bigger volume of Scions for the damage rate ability than I had given it credit for. So I do quite like the card over time, and I think being a 2 CP 7K instead of this 4 CP 8K like stat line that we were hoping for is not really as big of a downside as I thought it was at first.
Yeah, that's fair. You know what Lightning's needed for a long time is a Dia from Opus 2, but without the EX burst. We're talking Arisha. I mean, just like, why does this have 5,000 power? Why? Is it the Type 0 tax?
I feel like they could have just given this EX burst and it would have just been fine, and instead they did not.
They did not.
There's really not a whole lot else to say about it, I guess.
Garbage. But a card that's gotten a lot of people interested is Ixion. And I actually misread this. I thought that when you paid the kicker, it changed it from the 2 costs to the 3 costs. It actually is 3 costs or less, so it still hits all the 2 costs as well. So the kicker is just pure value for you. So my bad on misreading this. I've got a few friends who play, my buddy plays the Rydia palette, like all 2-cost cards, so he's like, oh my god, this card's just going to crap on me. Granted, it's in Lightning, and Lightning just hasn't been super strong these days, but it's like a cheaper Exodus, and you don't get the backlash. Granted, you can't hit anything above 2 or 3, so again, I think of something like Soirees. Well, this does nothing against Soirees, but if 2 and 3 costs are really relevant, seems like it's got to be good, right?
Yeah, no, I think that this card is like, a lot of people said this card is like too strong, or this card is not strong enough, and I think the reality is, as it usually is, somewhere in between. I think it's a good and important card to have in the game that we probably should have had in the game a long time ago, and we just didn't get it until now. So,
well said. Well, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Got to channel Mr. Cool because we are going to the void. X-Death has come. Some people are super high on this card. I do love the artwork. I like that it's a unique effect. It's very interesting. However, I'm not super high on this myself. I've seen it in action a few times, and I'm just not impressed. So my issue is that, one, it's a mid to late game card, right? You don't want to see this early. It doesn't do anything if you see it early. You didn't remove any cards. You can just Amaterasu it. 2, it's kind of weird to me that it doesn't remove summons. Maybe that was on purpose. Maybe they wanted you to be able to use like Man in Black or some other kind of summon thing with it. 3, even if you get to its big point where it removes everything, it's big beefy 10k, it's 20 cards removed, and now at the end of each of your turns, they select a character, remove it entirely from the game. Undeniably a strong effect. I do like that. However, as I mentioned earlier, it's an effect that says your opponent picks the best thing for them and gets rid of that. And if this, again, that's what made Neo X-Death strong, right? It was so early that you don't have a choice. You don't get to pick because you only have one thing on the field. Well, if this is coming down the mid game and I've got 5 backups and a monster and a couple forwards, I've got to get rid of my worst thing. Okay, I'll throw that out. And then there's no punishment for choosing this guy like Neo X-Death. Cool. Now I'll just break him. Now I'll just blast him. Now whatever. Like, I don't know. I would love to be wrong because I know a lot of people like this card, and I would absolutely love to be proven wrong, but I'm not super high on this guy. What about you?
Yeah, so I think that the primary reason that you're going to play this card is just because it's a nice, solid body. And, I think, first of all, 10 or more is really not that difficult of a restriction. That's online from, like, turn 2, basically, in this game, because you just get rid of cards so quickly. Mm-hmm. So I think as a 4 CP 10k, that's just good. That's just, like, good enough for the card. And then the fact that he kind of, like, becomes Neo X-Death at the 20 mark, the way the game is played right now, where, like, players are not just, like, jamming a bunch of backups, but are instead putting forwards on the field, it kind of leads to these situations where even well into the mid game, players are on, like 2, 3, 4 backups rather than where they would have been a few sets ago is more like 3, 4, 5. And I think X-Death works much, much better in the kind of environment that we are in now rather than the kind of environment that we were in. Because I think you'll hit 20 a lot more quickly than you would expect. I think you can usually hit it in the first, I want to say 6 or 7 turns, maybe. It probably doesn't even take that long, depending on the kind of deck that you're playing, and depending on the kind of deck your opponent is playing, and the timing that X-Death has the field. But it does come on a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. And then once it hits that Neo excess status, if your opponent is on a relatively lower backup count,
Yeah.
it can be pretty backbreaking because your opponent usually wants to put in their 5th backup here, and that's when excess is really not that good. It's very, very good when you're playing a fight for the board against each other.
Yeah.
And excess is forcing your opponent to sack forwards instead of backups, or sack their 3rd backup, their 2nd backup instead of their 5th.
Good points. You definitely sold me on. I hope it does well. Here we have a card everyone was very excited about. This is O. He's technically a samurai, but again, there's no other lightning samurais, so that's not really relevant right now. Maybe it will be in the future. He has the Alua bubble, which is always very nice, and I think the big exciting thing is one, he just generates a crystal, and then his special, especially with Glaciella, is just brutal, because not only is it just, break something, it gains a crystal. So as long as you can pay the lightning and the other CP, you can just go do, your board's gone. Like, he seems potent. That being said, I've only seen Wind, Water, Glaciella stuff so far. I haven't seen anyone lean into lightning. So this card could get ignored just because he's in lightning, but his text reads great, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think this is like the card that really makes you want to play Water Lightning Crystals, because like Glaciella is gated by how many crystals you have, and this card says, well, if you resolve the ability, you can have as many crystals as you want. Like, it doesn't consume any, and so it just has 2 CP break a thing when you assemble the combo, and that's really, really potent in this game. Like that's like, I'm not even upset about killing like soiree members for the kind of efficiency that O is offering, and that's what really makes me want to try that archetype over the Wind Water. That being said, it's very sad that we have the bubble on O, and he can still be Amaterasu. So I'm not really sure that like the pieces really line up quite perfectly, but depending on how the meta shapes up, Water Lightning Crystals with O and Glaciella together could be like a driving force in the meta. I definitely think.
I hope I get to see him on streams that I get to cast, so I can go, oh, just make some goofy noise. Yeah, he's fun. All right, there we have the Orc. That's the lightning monster. Move past him. Sidiclan Gully, which is Idolus in lightning, and 6 sets later for some reason. I like this card. I wonder why it took them so long for them to get this one. Because, EX Burst, get back a character. Pretty good.
Yeah, it does seem like something that should have existed a long time ago, but it didn't. It's just like a Powercraft named Sage from Opus One, but it's definitely nice. Being able to stack in like particularly Mono Lightning, being able to stack a large number of EX Bursts built into your backup lineup is definitely potent in that kind of deck. It makes it a very nice mid-range deck. So I would expect to see this just like as a generic staple going forward.
Absolutely. Better late than never, I suppose. Here we have Quan. I wasn't super high when I saw this. I kind of thought about it some more. There are ways you can play around the restriction of you can only use it if you have one forward on the field, and then it's technically a straight buff over the old Opus 1 Red Mage because you don't have to pay lightning. So you can do something like put out your forward, use this effect, attack, and then put out any other forwards you want in main phase 2. That being said, with a lot of cards like this, I guess it just kind of bums me out that 16 sets later, it's not just of course you like. There's still an argument to play Red Mage because it doesn't have that restriction of, well, no, I can Red Mage Behemoth King out even when I've already got another forward. I don't have to do this weird board manipulation. So it's not bad. I guess I'm just surprised that that I'm even thinking, maybe I would still rather play Red Mage in certain situations. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest draw of this is that because this is a job Agito Cadet, there's a searcher for it in Lightning already. Kalia Cheval.
Yeah.
And so like that's going to be the main reason this card sees play. That being said, it could just be solid enough in Mono Lightning that you would play it even without that, but that's definitely like the main reason that we're going to see this card at the table. And then having relevant text is just a nice bonus.
Absolutely. And then we've got the Man in Black, who's not Golbez, of course. When he enters or attacks, you get this summon, and you can actually loop it infinitely in the sense that once you play the card, even though it was removed, it goes right back into your break zone, kind of becomes a normal card at that point. Already saw my friend do something fun with this where he used the Opus 6 Ramu. He broke his opponent's Atomos, had Ramu give Man in Black haste, Man in Black attacked again, immediately pulled the Rot. Like, and so kind of fun loops. That being said, I don't know. Like I'm waiting to be shown the light on this card because I'm looking at the text. It's like there's got to be something like goofy you could do with this, right? Like something kind of broken.
Yeah.
But at least seeing it in practice, it just kind of seemed a lot more average than I was expecting. I don't know. Like it just seemed. I don't know what I was hoping for, but so far I haven't seen that thing that makes me go like, that's why you play this card.
Yeah, it does. It is a little difficult. The card has a ton of value built into it. Obviously, when you remove it from the game, that card says that you can play it whenever, as long as you pay the cost, which is not free, but depending on the summon that you get, definitely like worth it. Like I would definitely play Ashura or Chocobo or 6 CP Odin that costs 1, over and over again every turn. And I think the big part is after you've played the summon, that summon goes back to the break zone. So you can just continue playing the same summon over and over and over again every turn. That being said, it's not immediately clear like where this card is going to get a lot of its value. Like what its best partner is, I suppose. Yeah. The most immediate one that I see is definitely Ashura, because that's the main problem with Ashura. Is like once you've played all of your Ashuras over and over and over again, they're gone, like with Krill or whatever, where you have to continue bouncing your Citra, and that kind of becomes the neck on that card. But with Man in Black, it just says, well, if you just attack, you get to cast Ashura, which is really, really, really strong if you're protecting this and with other summons and or protection effects in Wind in particular. So I'm really excited to try this card in Wind Lightning, especially with the Force energy with the Hooded Man that we'll get to later, and Cecil and stuff like that. It is very sad that it has card name Golbez, because card name Golbez is like one of the best things about Wind Lightning in general. But it's still probably good enough there anyways. And I think it also just works, in like those Odin Lightning synergy decks. And potentially, like Earth, Lightning, just summons, because X Death kind of like works around the card.
Great points. Here we have Celire. I feel like this card's place is in Mono Lightning. I saw someone try to do like Lightning Ice or Lightning whatever, and they just didn't have the CP to pay for it. They just never really had the Lightning CP, so I feel like you want it in Mono. I mean, for a 1-cost body that has the flexibility it has, it can't be bad. At the same time, I have to admit I just feel a little underwhelmed looking by it. Like maybe its best effect is the second one where you can break a 2-cost, assuming you're fighting a bunch of 2-costs. If you're not, then obviously you have the lightning tax at the end. It's got to hit active for it is a black mage too, technically. Granted, they didn't really show up last, but you could put it in the black mage deck. It does fit in with the elements. If you discard it, you can discard it for Black Waltz's 3 effect. So I want to see it in Mono Lightning, I think, before I'm totally... my jury is out on it, but I don't know. It's kind of like I like it and dislike it at the same time, if that's possible.
Yeah, I really like the card. I'm not exactly sure how powerful it is, and I think it's gonna take a long time to like figure out the kind of deck that this goes in. Because, well, obviously I think it just goes in immediately with the Black Waltz cards, because it's Job Black Mage and it's Lightning, and you're always playing Black Waltz 3 and VV in those decks, so there's that. But also just because it has a very, very heavy Lightning cost restriction, and I'm not immediately sure if that's actually, playable in the kinds of decks that the Black Waltz decks are becoming. They're kind of, Earth Lightning or Water Lightning or Fire Lightning, and I'm not really sure if you can pay like all of these effects at any given point in time, so it kind of has reduced value in those multicolor decks. That being said, it is really cool, and it does have nice synergy with Zombie. Again, it's another nice 1 CP, so it works with Mira, so I'm excited to try it in the Black Mage Earth Lightning deck. I think it's a big upgrade from Ewan, which is a card that we previously played in the deck, but it's not, like a standout awesome card or anything.
Yeah. All right, now we have Cisne, and again, I've played Turk, so this is a card I've actually gotten to test. It's great on damage 3, particularly if Sang is out, because now it's a 9k haste and brave. At the same time, if it's out with all the other Turks, they're already so big and stompy that it's kind of just more the same. So the interesting part about her is her entry effect. I do love that she's 2, so you can just play her for 2. You don't have to do the entry effect, so if there's no need to, you just want the body. That is really nice. That being said, I was a little underwhelmed by the entry effect. It it felt difficult to discard something in order to get rid of my opponent, because the most powerful card you can discard currently is Sing. But that's the one Turk I don't want to discard because he's the number one target for my opponents. Yeah. They're always going to kill this. So I need the next one to be able to replay it. So unless you're discarding like the Root or Reno, like even discarding Elena is like, well, it's 7k, but, and if you don't discard a Turk, it just feels like it doesn't do it. You're not going to kill anything with it. So like you have to discard a Turk, and kind of similar with the Ice Turk, like it's just not something that really, I want to be putting the Turk bodies out. I don't want to be throwing them away. So that part of her I was a little underwhelmed by. That being said, the Turks needed more names. So the fact that it's just another job Turk, that's a plus. But also, and you kind of hinted at this earlier, I don't feel like Turks has done anything different with this, with her, with the Ice guy. I don't feel like the deck is like, oh, it has a new angle now. It's like, no, it just does Turk things. So,
Yep, no, totally agree. It's obviously a great upgrade for the deck, but it's not like, oh yeah, well now I get to do this thing that I couldn't do before. It's just like, well, now I have another member, and I don't think that Turks have kind of hit the critical mass, as it were, of like there's so many Turks that it's just like very easy to activate all their effects. It's still like kind of difficult, and I don't think that Turks are gonna like take over the meta just because they have a couple of new names. But maybe if like they keep getting new member of the Turks, then it could push them over that critical mass of volume that needs to really shine.
All right, so I've got some good news. This next card is absolutely an upgrade over its Opus 3 self, and this is Jack for Type 0. The bad news is that's not saying anything, because that's arguably was one of the worst cards ever made, because it was just... I mean, like, okay, yeah, it's better than that card because that card was wretched, but I can't believe this costs 3. If this costs 2, I still don't know if I would play it. But okay, 2, it can trade up to anything. It can deal 2 points of damage. Like, 3? You want me to pay 3 for this card? Like, I can't believe this costs 2. I just can't get over that.
Yeah, it's funny because this card is so bad, like, on paper, and, Dice Bryn Hilder, but, like... sometimes dealing 2 damage, you just get them. I don't really think that's like a good angle, but like I have seen some funny Octagon games where it's just like when everybody's playing that early set jank, like Jack can get in there and you just kill him over 2 turns with the Jack or whatever. So it is funny, but yeah, it's not a good card, and I don't expect to see a lot of it.
Fair enough. Now we have Knight. That's just kind of pack fodder. That's the forward Knight. Yep. Here's the backup. That's the standard unit 1 for Lightning. Hooded Man. Yep. This is our legend. I'm very curious to see. So first of all, the name is, I don't know. Like, so the Wind Hooded Man is still great. Even 6 sets later, it's got an EX burst. It gets you back a prominent 4. The fact that it reactivates forwards is huge. This guy is... I think I'd like him a lot better if he was a rare. As a legend, he's kind of... So here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with this card. It's one of these cards where I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you get his effect off, he comes in, you remove 1, you get all your backups back, which means if you have 5, you've got a spare 1, and you draw a card. So he's Pain. He's Opus 1 starter Pain, and he has haste. Nothing wrong with that. However, because he has to remove a card named Kane or Hooded Man from the break zone, basically means you have to play 3 of these, which again then makes him the double susceptibility to the 2 prominent summons of both Amaterasu and Mist Dragon, so they can just Mist Dragon the thing away. Like I don't know. I don't know if again, maybe it's this weird thing of I just wanted a better Lightning legend because I just don't feel like Lightning's gotten any great legends for a long time. So when I saw him, I was like, oh, he's like tied to himself. I don't know. And again, it sounds like I'm down on it, which I'm not, in the sense that I think all the text on here real. If you get this guy off, free card, I can go in immediately and draw a card. Feels great, but I just wish he didn't. And why does he have that effect? Why is he tied to another copy of himself? I don't know. I have no idea. Jared, tell me about Hooded Man.
Yeah, so I think that I agree with some of the points that you brought up here, but I disagree with more of them. I think that this card is just like, let's do the CP evaluation real quick.
Please,
when you play him, you remove a copy. It says activate everything and draw a card. So like activate its cost or more and draw a card is Pain. And we all know how good Pain was.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the longest time. And people say that like, well, Pain's time is gone. But I think that they're kind of like missing the fundamental point there, is that the point of playing free cards by playing 2 named backups, so taking 6 backup slots, is gone, and that I can like totally agree with. Like you're hooked into Wind Water, and that means you can't play Sarah Northshaw. This card has a much looser restriction. I think playing. All you need to do is play 3 Canes and 3 Hooded Mans, or 3 or 6 Hooded Mans if you're playing Wind Lightning, and that's all. That's the only thing that you need to turn this card on. I agree. There is the Mist Dragon, there is the Amaterasu, and those are pain points for this card. But then I think the math just checks out here. Like when you're on 4 or when you're on 5, he's as or more efficient than Pain. He has haste. He's an 8k. I think he works in Dragoons. I think he works in Ninjas because you already have the other Hooded Man in there. I think he works in Wind Lightning. I think he has enough that you would want to play him in Mono Lightning with some of the other Canes too. So I really like this card. I'm really high on it. I don't tend to like Lightning cards very much, but this is kind of like a Wind card disguised as a Lightning card, or like disguised as a Lightning card, you know? So, I really think that this card is quite good, and that we will see some of this card going forward, for sure.
I love this character from After Years, so I have my fingers crossed that you are 100% right and that I'm wrong about all my worries about him. All right. We've got Yugiri, first card she's gotten since Opus XVIII. It's been a while. So she's an EX Burst. She's a Ninja Searcher. Another card kind of like Mana, except you get it on a body, which is great. Her second ability is, at first I was kind of like, geez, that's expensive. Like, you have to discard 2. But I've played a lot of Ninja games where once I've got the backups out, all the other backups are just kind of dead cards in my hand. So the idea of like, well, okay. I do kind of wish it was just an indiscriminate break. Like, you already have to discard 2, and they specifically have to be ninjas. Why then can you only break a 4 or less? That seems very restrictive, but for the search and the EX Burst alone, I feel like that's going to make her a shoo-in in any ninja deck.
Yeah, so I think you're definitely right. This is definitely locked into ninjas. But in that deck, I think it's very good because, Edge makes her cost 2. It's really quite that simple. Do you remember what it was like when Edge and Mina first came out and your opponent goes turn 1 Edge and then turn 1 Mina? Well, now they get to do that, but they can also put another 5k on the board because they can just say, okay, I'll play Edge, I'll play Yugiri, I'll search Mina, I'll play Mina, and it's like everything costs 2 and searches for a card, and it's going to be very annoying. And I think the other untold story here is that in the Ninja deck, before you had 3 Mina and you had 3 Edge, and those were your only ways to get to Edge, right? And that's obviously the most important card in the deck. Now with Yugiri and Sid Palandina, you have 12 ways to get to turn 1 Edge in that deck, and that is really like 9 is the magic number. We saw that with Fat Chocobo. When you run 9, you have over a 90% chance to open your turn 1 whatever it is that you want to open. And with 3 Yugiri, 3 Sid Palandina, 3 Mina, I think your chances of opening and playing a nice turn 1 with Edge is gotten much higher, and I think it's very important that this card exists in that situation. Now for the action effects, I think that's just flavor text. Sometimes it's going to matter, but more often than not, it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, 12 potential edges is fantastic in my book, so that sounds great. Yeah. Then Zliarte, she's just kind of common pack fodder. Just get past her. Dragoon backup, absolutely great standard unit targets for it to play. It can another backup that can be hit off of Alice. Maybe, is this the card that finally makes Dragoons? Probably not, but it's a good one, so.
It's nice to have another backup. That is very important for the 2 CP one that counts the number of card named Dragoons that you have on the field and gets power. So it is very nice to have more of those, and it's very welcome. I don't know if between that and Hooded Man, the deck can really hold weight in general, though.
That's fair. All right, well, we were shocked by that, but we're moving on to water. This Blue Mage, I was actually kind of excited about when I first saw it, but I thought its action ability costs 0, and it actually pays 1. For me, that's the difference between, then I don't want to try it. Do you feel any differently?
Yeah. I think it's maybe not quite as bad as some people are saying. I think that it's kind of like Scavenging Ooze from Magic, and Scavenging Ooze has been a very good card over the years, and I think this card does have some potential. I think it's very low chance that it does see play just in terms of slots, and there's no sideboarding in this game, so you're not really sure if it's going to be good, but It is not like a total junk common, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. Here's Alpha Note. We kind of mentioned him earlier with Alice. He's incredibly strong on damage 5. He's got that standard water effect originally. This is a draw 2 discard, helps you scry. I really like him with Alice. I don't know if he's generic enough to be played without her. I mean, again, his damage 5 is good, but especially given these past 2 opuses, I feel like it's very difficult to get the damage 5 effects on. I know I've made an extra point if my opponent has cards like this, like, well, I'll never put you to damage 5 then. It's either 4 to dead or bust. Like, so do you see him any differently?
Yeah, in general, I think a big difference between some of the Scions of old and the Scions of new is that the Scions of new are not really offensive cards. For the most part, you're not like rushing in there with haste or whatever, and you kind of expect to be playing a mid-range or a slower strategy. And I think in that regard, having the damage 3 on Alice and the damage 5 on Alphinaud is all upside. Do I ever expect to resolve the damage 5 on Alphinaud? Definitely not. But do I think that it will stop some of my opponents from putting me to 5 damage? Yes, and I think in that regard, it is a very useful ability to have on the card.
Yeah, that's fair. Here's Andoria. Part of me wants to just say, no one's going to play this, slots, yada, 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 it's too specific. At the same time, it is a good effect, especially if there's they got a Barrett or some key forward you need to get rid of, but I don't know. She's a queen, and Sarah can't search queens for some reason, even though it's a royalty position. Like, it's maybe there's some, I don't know, but then I also know there's these like aggro strategies of here's Rydia, here's the twins. Oh, okay, I've got 2 forwards. Happily slam this down. It kind of reminds me of Lose Off from that, because Lose Off was really popular in the Doga deck, but he also had back attack, and maybe that was the difference. I don't know. Do you see anything in Andoria?
Yeah, so I think this deck really works best in Vikings specifically, which hasn't really been a deck for a little while, but it isn't necessarily a bad deck, and it probably did get better with Moshri leaving the format, because that means there's going to be fewer EX bursts, fewer cards that just like Brynhilder that deal 5k. Like, there's a whole host of those. And I think they're going to kind of leave the format, especially at the beginning. And I think in that respect, Vikings could be getting better, and Andoria could be a nice removal spell, like 1 or 2 of them. Kind of like the way that Snow works in the Vice Kings deck. Kind of the same deal, but a little more potent as a removal option instead of as, just like dull and put in all my damage. But it does have some unfortunate name clash in that deck as well, because the Andoria is the card that lets you draw with the Vikings, but I think that's a c'est la vie, and if you are swinging with your Vikings and resolving this Andoria, then you're kind of winning the fight anyways, potentially.
Good stuff. All right, so next we have Jared Spoiler. This is Cuchulainn. This one is not the Impure. He's just Cuchulainn. I thought this card was terrible when I first read it, because I thought you had to wait till your next main phase. I didn't realize it was just the next main phase. You are your opponent. It's interesting. It's very potent removal in the sense that you just choose a forward. It's put right into the break zone, so it bypasses any kind of protection, any kind of no break, any kind of can't be dealt damage, etc. And it means like on a burst, then the moment it becomes your turn, boom, they get to put it in the break zone. That said, this does create a stack when it happens too. It could technically be Amaterasu. Something like Win can bounce the forward back to their hands. Or maybe if it's a forward that they weren't, I wasn't going to attack. Oh, I hit this on a burst. All right, well, I'll just throw it in anyway. So I don't know. Like, on one hand, I like it because I think it is really potent removal against certain threats, something like a Barrett maybe you're having trouble getting rid of. At the same time, it does give your opponent a lot of opportunities to do something about it. So I don't really know what to think about this card. You've seen it longer than anybody else. How do you feel now that you've, this whole set's released?
Yeah, I still think that this card, has some like niche edge case scenarios for playability, but nothing has like really jumped out at me as a reason that like we would want to play this over some of the other existing options, particularly Atomos. The 3CP water summon is really the standout premier removal water summon that operates at this the CP cost, or around the CP cost, I guess. But I do think it will see play in like if Earth, Water, Mill, like those stall decks come back. I do think that this card will easily be slotted in those decks, because it is just it's a nice clean kill spell for those, and I think that is still potent.
Excellent. All right, then we have the Quadev. That's the water monster. We touched on them. Chemist, that's our standard unit water backup. We've touched on those. Kraken is the chaos. You know, I don't really have anything else to say about him. Anything you want to touch on?
No, not really. It is nice that he has EX, but it's not a draw. It's a draw discard, which makes it 1,000 times worse.
Yeah. Well, and it's unfortunate. This next card's terrible, too. We have nothing to say about this. Haha! Just kidding ya. This is Glaciella Wazette. Yeah, according if RB gave me the correct pronunciation and she plays the game, so I'm assuming it is. Glaciella Wazette is easily the most interesting legend in the set. I think that's pretty unequivocal, whether she ends up being great or not, which, spoiler alert, she's great. It just changes the way you can play a lot of decks. I've already seen it a lot in action. Obviously, this enables any of your Brave Exvius characters. It's the most support crystals have gotten, maybe that they will get. There's only a total of 6 crystal cards in this entire set, which is incredibly low, but Glaciella says, well, I'm the payoff for that. I knew the card would be good. I knew it would be fun. I completely overlooked her Surefire Burst. I kind of thought this would be more like the support card. This is what enables all this goofy stuff. She can solo stuff. Her Surefire Burst is absurd with a very low character amount. So I saw a game the other day. My opponent had a Tomos, 3 backups, and Glaciella, and she can hit stuff for 10,000 damage. 10,000 damage! And the more it builds up, you've got a full backup line, you've got some forwards, cool, they remove her on the stack, well, Surefire Burst anyway, 12,000, 14,000 of that thing, like, I was just like, oh my gosh, she just solos stuff, like, she doesn't even need the team, she just goes off on her own, not to mention everything she enables. I will be amazed if this isn't one of the prominent decks. I don't know if Wind Water is the best, that's the one I've seen the most of, maybe there's Water, Fire, Water, Ice, Water, whatever, but easily the most interesting legend, the one people are the most excited about. It's easy to see why. It bums me out. She got treated so well, and my boy Edgar got treated so poorly, but nonetheless, card's a banger.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's definitely the best card in the set. Well, at least I think so. Yeah, it's you hit on everything. You know, like the card is just standalone great, and it's the card that will make all of these archetypes, and that we really can't say any more about that. It's the standout card here.
Absolutely. You know who's not a standout is Curelia. For a moment, I was almost excited because I was like, oh, it's a new Water Knight. You know, can't ever have enough of those for Gawain or to search out. But all he does is he gives power buffs. And if you play Knight, you know they have no issue getting big as heck. Like, their skits so big. I just wish if he just did anything, like anything interesting to that deck, it could be fun to put him in. But he's just a power body. So sad.
Yeah, no, that's it.
So a set of cards, and I guess we can talk about them together, that I was quite excited about when the first set came out, but I have to admit not as excited now that I've seen them. Or I guess we can talk about these separate or together, whatever you want. This is Makis the Phantasm, and Sela the Ensorcelled, I think, is the other card that he goes with. They go in with the Dual Horn. He is technically a ninja, but Water doesn't really ever use ninjas. Most people don't even use a Zoye. He's got some neat effects in that he can play a Dual Horn right onto the field. So if you're playing Water Earth, you could bring out one of the other ones. It's only on entry. And one thing I'd overlooked was his field ability. The fact that opponents' forwards enter the field dull. So it is a cheaper version of Ultimisia from Opus 1 if you want to do the, what's her name? Gentiana trick, where if they enter dull and they have no abilities, they have no entry effects. Kind of neat. Maybe there's something there. Do you want to mention her as well, or do you want to wait till she comes up to mention?
Yeah, Elise? No, we can talk about these cards together. I think that's a good idea.
So mentioning Elise too, I am amazed there is no natural way within these dual horns to activate Elise. Now, I get it. Her on-attack ability is incredibly powerful that you can just remove. I think it's a character even. It's not even just a forward. Like, that's kind of gross. You can just start putting their backups. But she has no natural way to activate herself or ever attack. So get out your Opus 10 Ashes, I guess, to reactivate this card. Like, that part alone makes me really low on her. I don't know. Maybe playing these in practice, they'll be stronger than they read. But reading about them and thinking about them, I don't know. I'm just not seeing. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of work when there's so many other cards in the game that can do similar things for easier. The Gentiana angle is what excited me the most. Tell me about the Dual Horns.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to talk about here. The first one that I want to do is actually a lot of players were saying both in Japan and outside that when they saw Alice that they're like, oh, this is just like it's a replication of the mechanic that existed in her game. So basically, in her fight in the game, uh, she debuffs herself because she has like some weird religious belief that she's making herself stronger by debuffing herself. So yeah, that's her thing is that she is actually one of the strongest characters in the game, but she enters duel, so she's debuffing herself there. So that's kind of like the reason, and so people thought like, well, yeah, there isn't going to be a way to activate her in dual horns because that just has nothing to do with the synergies that they had together in the game. So yeah, so that's kind of like the background into like why Alice the Encircled is the way she is. In terms of like the cards individually, I think that you're supposed to play these as a package together, just in general. But I'm not like really sure where the home for that is. I think there's a case for it in Mono Water, and I think there's a case for it in Ninjas actually, because so ninjas can play the Maki off color because of Edge, and then he also gets one cheaper, so you pay 2 for the Maki and you pay 2 for the Alice, and then they can activate the Alice with Tsukinoa, and they can continue bouncing Tsukinoa back to the hand and repeatedly playing it over and over again because it's so CP efficient, and they can bounce it with Bismarck. So there is like a potential for this engine to exist in Ninjas. Additionally, you could. It just also seems like a very very solid option for like a mono water deck or potentially a mono wind deck, but probably not just because it's sorry, a wind water deck, but probably not just because it's kind of hard and there's easier things that you can do than activate the Alice Encircled every turn. But a mono water deck could potentially do it with cards like Folka or with the Opus X Ash, like you mentioned, which is something that they reprinted recently and probably were considering when they printed this card. How competitive and how strong these strategies are, I'm not really sure. If you can protect the Alice Encircled and you can, swing with it every turn, you're gonna win that game because the attack ability is really just so strong on this card. But barring that, I'm not really sure that this is going to be quite competitive enough.
Well said, my friend. Next, we have the Gordon's Fisherman. Anyone watch those old commercials for fish sticks? Dude, this card I totally overlooked. One, because I just saw the English version recently, and I saw someone use it in a match. This card's great. So he's a prince. He can get searched out by Sarah. He costs 2 CP, can let you filter through your deck. And then if you're willing to pay 1 more, you draw a second. So he becomes Meryl Web for 1 cheaper. Granted, there's no EX burst, but he can be searched out. Like, he seems like a lovely little fit into water or water anything.
Yeah, I think this in for this card in particular, it's nice that you can search him with Sarah, and then he helps you carve out very nicely. So I think he's just potentially better than Princess Sarah for like mono water. Outside of that, I'm not really sure if he's going to be able to be slotted, just because it's going to be very difficult for decks besides mono water to consistently pay the 1 water for the second ability and not want to be searching their other backup.
Yeah.
But it is very nice for that deck in particular.
Fair enough. All right, we got some fodder coming up. We're going to skip through Zexen. He's a big body. He's skippable. Elise, the Ensorcelled, we talked about. White Mage is the water standard unit backup. Princess Sarah. God, I love this amount of art. I've always enjoyed this image. It wasn't the first time I saw it on this card. I've always liked it. Very interesting card. I don't know how you best use this. Do you slot in Cactars to then ping her on your opponent's turn? My friend mentioned using Porum. Well, I'll just use Opus 15 Porum. I was like, is that really what you want to use your Porum on? Like hitting your own card? I mean, it makes it so she could block potentially after that, but I don't know. That said, if you have a way to very easily keep hitting this, you are just drawing cards at just great value, but where is that home? I don't know. They really seem to be on this kick of 1 CP 7Ks that can't attack or block lately. I was thinking of Maya. How do you see Princess Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I'm not. It's a very weird card. It has the kind of text that you would just kind of expect it to be abused, but there isn't really a whole lot. There's like just enough restrictions that it's difficult to abuse it. So I was going to try this with Porom. I think that's probably the most straightforward way to go about it. That being said, I don't think it's going to be like a driving force in any of the decks that it's in. It's probably going to be more of an afterthought. I highly doubt that you're going to play Cactar and Princess Sarah in the same deck so you can continue to Cactar the Princess Sarah. That just seems like so much more work than playing Porom. So, yeah, I think Porom and Kukulane just like look like good cards in general, and having Princess Sarah in a deck like Mono Water that potentially doesn't really make otherwise make use of them could be a good angle to go about it.
Fair enough. Next, we have Fremelda, a card that I both find terrifying and underwhelming at the same time. Unfortunately, until damage 3, she's completely blank, which sucks. However, on an EX burst, if you're on 3, you get to reduce something by 7,000 power, always good. And similar to Elise, her on attack on damage 5 is huge. It's the same thing. You just choose a character, plop it right into the break zone. Best thing on the field, goodbye. Again, we've mentioned earlier, how reliable is damage 5 these days? It doesn't feel super reliable to me, so, man, if her on-entry was just without a burst and maybe tied to something else, because I get they probably didn't want to just, like, power creep the Ovalia, but, I don't know. It's just, I don't like cards that don't have text until I'm on a certain point of damage, especially when it's that high.
Yeah, I agree. This card obviously reads absolutely insane at damage 5, and it's kind of like Agrius at damage 3. So it can't really be that bad. I just wish that there was a deck that could play this that had a nice way to recycle it as like a one-of. So you could just play one from Elden in your deck and then always have access to it so that the damage 3 and the damage 5 threat was always there. I don't think, as it stands, that basically any deck would want to aggressively slot this, because if you're playing a deck that has a lot of recycle, then that's going to be like Earth Water, and Earth Water has access to Robel, or like a billion other ways that they could be doing the same thing that Fremelda is doing, but without damage restriction. So I think that basically the only place that I really expect to see this tested even at all is Water Lightning, with Alice potentially getting this back, or Alphanod potentially doing some enabling here and there.
Yes, sir. Next, we have Miranda, a card that is meaningless because Glaciella exists, and Glaciella can do everything she would want to do better.
Yep.
And then Minwoo, I will say I love this art on the card packs. Like, whatever it is, that color behind him of his background just really makes the card packs pop. So great point for the art. It's really interesting. I was surprised how much effort people were talking about the summon removal, the cost reduction, but maybe that's because they don't want to pay 5 for this. Like, they want to pay 2, but they don't want to pay 5. Obviously, his action ability is incredible. It's a free cancel for anything. Action, summon a bit, action or auto ability. You just get to cancel it outright. And it's not a specific forward, so if they have a Blaze, they hit 2 of them, you're picking one, you just get to cancel it. It's completely for free. Is that too much at 5? Obviously, it doesn't get around things like sweepers, board wipes, summons as well. Man, he's a neat idea, but yeah, I don't know. The whole summon thing of removing 3 different elements, that almost just feels too... I don't know. Why not make it like for each element you remove, you can reduce his cost by 1. It can be a maximum of 3, get him down to 2. That would have been kind of interesting, that you could kind of play with his cost. But even then, and I'll ask you, do you want to pay 5 for this? Do you even want to pay 2? How do you feel about this card?
Well, I don't want to pay 5 for it. I'll be the first to say. I think that a lot of people are... I think there's a lot of people, again, severely over or underrating this card. I think a lot of people say that it's like total garbage, and I think that's a little too far out there. And I think a lot of people are also saying that it's really, really good and going to change the meta, and I think that's also a little too far out there. I think as a 5 CP 8K with just the bottom ability and ignoring the top half of the text, it's underwhelming. It only stops abilities, and it only does it once per turn, and it's under curve, and that's just too many restrictions, I think. So I think you have to be able to play it at 2, or have something that really, really, really needs to be protected. However, the only things that like really, really, really want to be protected in this game are things, you know, like well, potentially Alice Encircled, or you know, like Fat Chocobo, the Twins, Bismarck, Leviathan, and while those are all good cards, basically all of them can be protected in better ways than what Minwu is offering. And I think the really big one with, you know, like the Twins and Alice Encircled and stuff like that is we already have this card, and it's called Oron. Oron is just a magnet, and it just does the same thing but better, and it has a damage ability, and it also has an extra ability if you have a summoner. Like it's really just much better in a lot of ways than Minwu is. And I think people are really overreacting to the bottom half of the ability. That being said, if you play this for 2, it is very, very good. And there's only a few decks in the game that are ever going to be able to play for 2. And really the big one is 3-color Rydia Twins.
Yep.
That's really where I expect to see this card played at all. And I do expect it to see play in that deck, but it's really just that.
Yeah, well
there
said.
I do think it will be quite good, though.
Minwu, he's got his hand out with the globe. It's like he's trying to bring this to you. Not interested. Not selling what you're buying. Here's Mog. I at first I just kind of dismissed this card. I was like, that's too situational. But then I started thinking about it. If you see this at the right time, you know, that they could play a 3CP, 4CP backup, and you say, yep, yeah, you're not searching. No big deal. They can't really kill him because you can always break it on the stack. And I even thought of, wow, all those turns that I've ran into my opponent's Tyro EX burst. Wouldn't it have been great to be like, well, before combat, let's just make sure that Tyro doesn't go off. But then what if you do that and then they don't hit the Tyro, and so now you've just killed a body for nothing? Like, and if Sid Randall Remedy taught me anything, is that it's just so difficult to time out trying to block your opponent's searches. So yeah. I don't think this is very good. He is a Moogle though, but he's Mog 6 as a Moogle. We've got Mog 6 Moogles. We need different name Moogles.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the biggest part of this is that they gave us another Mog 6, which increases the potency of the S ability of the previous Mog 6, the Crystal one. So I could see playing some kind of split between those, where you play mostly of the old Mog 6 for Crystals, and then you play one of this, and sometimes this is just good enough, or it enables the S ability of the other one. That's really the only thing that I really have to say about it, I think.
Yeah. Here we have Ramada, which is some of the best support that Glaciella has. On entry, she just gets to bounce anything out of the way and then gets you a crystal. So she's all revved up for herself or for Glaciella. And then Glaciella can just say, hey, pay a crystal. She immediately has haste. She has 2,000 power, so she's going to get over or trade with anything you want. And then if you let her hit you, boom, that's 2 damage. I've already seen a few, surprise, you're dead, because I Ramada'd out of nowhere. Like, it's one of the best support cards I think Glaciella has. Card's just great.
Yeah, I think it's a very straightforward option for the deck. It's not particularly egregious, but it is nice that you can have a haste threat, a damage threat in a deck that doesn't otherwise have those. And getting that nice little tempo buff with the crystal is very, very good for it. I agree.
And final water card is the Rursan Reaver, which is your hero standard unit. This guy seems pretty underwhelming for me, just because you want to pay. Do you see anything different?
Yep. No, not really.
All right. That's water. So we're washed up with that. There's only one more to go, and that's going to be light, dark starters. Then we'll kind of mention some overall thoughts on the set. Jared and I are going to be out for now, but come back for part 3. Leave your comments below. And until then, we'll see you next time. Take care.